Okay, so today we're going to learn how to name ionic compounds. There are type 1 ionic compounds and type 2 ionic compounds. So we're going to start with type 1. Okay, type 1 ionic compounds contain usually a metal and a nonmetal. So the metal forms the cation and the nonmetal forms the anion. Or it can contain a metal and a polyatomic ion. Okay, you were given in class a list of polyatomic ions that you had to learn. It's best if you memorize them. It just makes naming a lot easier. Okay, so as we follow this little flow chart here, we're going to see that to name a type 1 ionic compound, first you're going to name the metal, and then you're going to name the nonmetal, but you're going to change the ending. So you're going to add a suffix. And you'll see how that works in just a minute. If there's no nonmetal, if instead you have a polyatomic ion, then you're going to name the metal and then name the polyatomic ion, and that's going to give you the name. And there's one polyatomic ion that has a positive charge, so we're going to put that with the metal section because the metals give you the cations. So this is ammonium. Ammonium is the only polyatomic ion that we're going to deal with that has a positive charge. So it's the only cation that's also a polyatomic ion. Okay, so let's get started. You've seen enough of this chart. We'll go through and name the compounds, and I'll follow the procedure from this chart. So if you get stuck, you can go back to this chart, and it should help you through it. So, first example. Okay, it says name the following type 1 compound. Okay, so here you have two elements. You have a metal, which is your calcium is your metal. And you have a nonmetal, which is chlorine. Okay, so your type 1 ionic compound, your cation comes from your metal, and your anion comes from your nonmetal. Okay, so according to the procedure, first thing you want to do is name the metal. Here we have calcium. Second part, you look at the nonmetal, you're going to name it, but you're going to change the ending. So if you just look at the nonmetal now, it's chlorine. Okay, so you're going to change the ending. You're going to add an IDE suffix. So basically, the last, we'll say the last syllable here, you cross it out for chlorine and you add "ide." So it's going to be calcium chloride. So basically, you name your metal, you name your nonmetal, but you change the ending. Chloride. There's the ending that we changed. And you're done. That's how you name a type 1 ionic compound. Let's try another example. Okay, so this one's slightly different. Still type 1 because it still has an ion that just has one common ion. All of the type 1 compounds have a metal that forms a cation that only has one common cation. Okay, so calcium would be another. Any element that's an alkali metal, an alkaline earth metal, aluminum also does this, which is in another group. And then there's a few transition metals that also fall under the type 1 category because they only have one common ion. Okay, so here we have our metal. And then here, we don't just have one other nonmetal, we have two nonmetals. So as you become familiar with your polyatomic ions, you're going to recognize that the NO3 actually comes from nitrate, which is a polyatomic ion. So this, over time, you'll recognize these as polyatomic ions. So, in this case, we don't just have a metal and a nonmetal, we have a metal and a polyatomic ion. So according to our chart, that we introduced in the beginning, the procedure is that you name the metal, which is potassium, and then we name the polyatomic ion, because we don't just have a nonmetal, but we have a polyatomic ion. So name the metal, and then name the polyatomic ion, which is nitrate, and we're done. So this is potassium nitrate. Okay, let's try another example. Okay, so here again you have a metal that only has one common ion. This is magnesium. Okay, so this is your metal, and this is your nonmetal. Well, excuse me, no, this is two nonmetals. So you're going to have, you'll recognize this later, and you'll notice that this is not just a nonmetal, but it's a polyatomic ion. Okay. So in this case, we'll follow the procedure of naming the metal, which is magnesium. And then naming the polyatomic ion, which is sulfate. So this is magnesium sulfate. Okay, now before we end this video, let me just point out what a common ion is. Okay, so magnesium, I said it's a metal that contains one common ion. So if you were to predict the charge on magnesium, there's only one charge that magnesium has as an ion, as a cation, and that would be at charge +2. There's no other cation for magnesium that is a common ion or that is as stable. So because there is only one possible cation that can form for magnesium, we name it as a type 1. As we go into the next section where we name the type 2s, you're going to see that these metals, the naming is very similar, but that these metals that are type 2, they can have more than one ion. They can form more than one ion. So the procedure for naming the type 2s is slightly different. Okay, but we're done with this video here, and next we'll try some type 2, naming type 2 compounds. Okay, I hope this helped. See you next time.